First of all, thank you so much for everyone for being here today for our webinar on power mapping. This is the fourth in our citizen activist series. Our hope with this series is that participants will get a solid grounding in basic organizing skills so that they can take action on issues they are passionate about. Think about these as organizing 101. If you're interested in the other webinars in the series that we've already done, we will have those up on our website soon. Today, I am incredibly excited to hear from truly impressive organizers about why power mapping is essential to effective organizing, how to create your own power maps, and then at the end, we will have a Q&A on strategic planning. I'll start with some introductions. We have Melissa Stiehler, Advocacy Director at Loud Light. Many of you must know her. Rose Welch, Community Engagement Associate Extraordinaire. And finally, my name is Eileen Berquist, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for the ACLU of Kansas. And I will be your host today and moderate the chat. So we will have time at the end for Q&A, and we would absolutely love to hear from you. If you have questions during the presentation, just type it into the chat. We'll address those questions in the order they're received. So we don't distract our presenters. Please send those questions directly to me so that they don't get a whole bunch of flashing lights. And I think that was perfectly timed because that is all I have for housekeeping. And I'm going to go off screen and hand it to Melissa. Looks like you folks are still on mute.
Technical difficulties. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. Wonderful. My name is Melissa Stiehler. I'm the Advocacy Director at Loud Light, and I'm so happy to be joining you all tonight, talking about how we're going to win by actually mapping out our power. Yeah, Rose.
So, sorry, I'm still trying to make this technical. Can you take that slide?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to plug this in.
I got you.
So, quick technical note, we're trying to do a cool thing because there's kind of a thing in Zooms where a lot of people really need to see people talking to be able to stay engaged. But then a lot of people who are neurodivergent, like myself, have difficulty staying on topic when we're just looking at talking heads. So we're going to do a cool thing where you have slides on one screen and you can go to the upper right-hand corner of that participant screen and click pin if you're the kind of person who needs to see the slides. And if not, you can stick to the default format, which is looking at whoever is talking. So those are kind of our options today, and something that's new that we're trying, and it's given us a little bit of difficulty, but now you have options. So
yeah, so those of you are old friends of mine, some of you are new friends of mine. So we're going to do a quick round robin with some introductions. And we're going to do alliterative adjectives. That is, you describe yourself with some kind of an alliterative adjective for your name. That means something that starts with the same letter as your name, and then also your pronouns. So, for example, my name is Magical Melissa. I use she, her pronouns, and I live here in Lawrence, Kansas. Let's go ahead and put your introductions in the chat real quick. And if you have anything that's particularly clever while we're setting up, you can come off mute and share your alliterative adjective.
Hey, Melissa, we're having a little trouble hearing you, I think, because we have the mic open on Rose's computer instead of yours.
Is this better?
Now we've got some feedback, so maybe huddle around whichever one has the mic on.
Is this better?
okay, how about that?
Perfect, much better. Thank you, folks.
Awesome. So yeah, I see in our chat here, we have got, let's see. Yeah, flip it over sideways. Oh, yep. Yeah, go ahead and put your introductions. And so that again is going to be your name, an alliterative adjective, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from. Go ahead and put that here in the chat.
Someone just direct messaged me saying lawyerish Leslie, she, her, hers in Kansas City. I like it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Manic Mary, I love it. Dynamic Danielle, aspirational Amy. Oh my God, y'all are so cute. Challenging Chad Childs. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. This is great. Jumpin' Jackie. That's true. I can attest to that. Jackie's always jumping at those good issues, making sure things get done. Well, perfect. Yeah. So let's go ahead and in just a second, we can, Magic Marcy, I'll take it. I'm here for that. Especially considering you are my elected official. So I appreciate that, Marcy. Let's hope for some magic in this upcoming legislative session. Peace, Mama Kate. I love it. I'll take it. That's great. All right. Let's go ahead and go over the agenda.
Okay, so I've got it up on the screen. First, we're going to talk about what power is. Then we're going to talk about relationships and their relation to power. And then we're going to do some mapping. And when I say we're going to do some mapping, I mean, for real, we're actually going to just draw some maps. And then we're going to put it all together. We would love it if someone if the participants, someone from the audience today, like if you popped up in the chat and let Eileen know, like if there's something that you have going on in your community that you would like to fix and you're ready to get started with a power map, like maybe there's something going on with the school board that you care about, or maybe there's something in the Kansas State Legislature or in your local, what do they call those terrible things that people
Neighborhood
have in
association.
Yeah, in your neighborhood association. Feel free to pop up and let Eileen know, and then we'll tag you in later because we're actually going to do some power maps together. So, and then we'll have some Q&A time. We will be sending out an email at the end of this, by the end of the week, and it will have a recording of this, some slides. So if you need to like take a break, go to the restroom, take a call, please feel free to do so. We can totally fill you in later. So, cool. Okay, so we'll start off. MLK Jr. taught that power is the strength and ability to produce change. So power is created by the relationship between interest, motivation, and resources. Interest are the things that people like need or want. You want to make enough money to live. You want to protect a river. Maybe you want to stay in public office. Motivation is what and how much people are willing to do to serve those interests. Maybe you're only willing to work 40 hours a week in order to make a living. Maybe you're willing to work 60. Maybe you're willing to spend an hour a week working on a cause to save a river. Maybe you're willing to go to a training webinar to learn how to make change. Resources are the assets we use toward serving those interests. People, energy, knowledge, relationships, and money. So I like to use going to the movies as an example. If I want to go to the movies, that is my interest. If I feel motivated enough to like get up and like put on pants in a pandemic and drive over there and buy a ticket and sit through the movie, like that's my motivation. If I have enough money to buy a ticket, if I have a car to drive over there, those things are the resources I use to achieve that goal. So that's how those three things work together. First, you have an interest, a thing that you want. Then you have motivation, what you're willing to do to get it, and you have resources, which are the things you use along the way. So organizing starts with analyzing those three things to find where power is, who has it, who doesn't have it, and who is willing to use it for what ends. So no one has an inherent understanding of power. It's not something that we like know automatically from birth, and it's definitely not something we learn about naturally. And in fact, many of the things that we think we know about power that we learn over time are like pretty actually wrong. Because of this, people often like under or overestimate like their own power or the power of other people. One common overestimation is that being right and having the facts is powerful in and of itself. But moral conviction is not power, it's a motivator. Having the facts, numbers, and truth on our side doesn't grant us power, but it can be used as a resource. Speaking for the majority doesn't matter unless the majority that you're speaking for is motivated to action. So what it comes down to is that we're really powerful when we stand together with motivation to take action for a shared interest. So Melissa?
Yeah, thanks so much. Let's talk about like our collective shared understanding of what power is, right? We know what it's not a lot of the things that we've been taught. So like whenever we're coming into actually mapping out our own power, what do we mean? We have a couple of firm truths that we in organizing believe about power. So first of all, we believe that power is neutral. I know that you all have heard like power corrupts and power is evil. No, power is just simply the ability to get things done. It's neutral. We also know that in order for us to get things done, it's necessary. We have to look at and understand our own power to be able to win on the issues that we care about. And it has many, many sources. There's not just one way to be able to flex our power and put our power into action. We have to look at the wide variety of different sources of power so that way we have a good strategy. So a couple of things we also know. Organizations don't inherently have power. We, in our organizing, we have to build that power. We have to show that power and we have to use that power. So developing relationships builds power. Showing power builds power. So for example, whenever we show up in the State House and we have our strength in numbers, somebody who perhaps underestimated us was like, wow, they have a ton of relationships. They all like, they can really like get things out there in Kansas. That's pretty cool. And then even using that power, being able to show that whenever we put out a call to action, folks show up, they turn out, they do the thing, that builds even more power with us. In addition to that, we know that people who have the power, those who are in charge, they're going to hold on to it. They're not going to just like be like, oh yeah, for sure, we're going to give you whatever you want. And we're just going to like bend to your will. Like that's not how that works either. But we know that we have to exercise power in order to make change. So let's talk about power in relationships. So power mapping begins by building a visual representation of existing power relationships. So we begin by asking, who has the power to permit or deny our goal? These people are the decision makers. Take, for example, a Kansas state senator who can sponsor our bill. They're our first target. Now, whenever I say target, I mean our primary decision maker, right? So let's take into account oftentimes actually, whenever people are working in politics, they ask and they make demands of people who can't actually get the thing done. So think about who is the person who can actually do what you want them to do. Additionally, take note that we say Kansas State Senator, not the Kansas State Senate, because not every senator is the same. And so whenever we're looking at the decision makers, you need to look at the specific individuals. In this case, our first target, a Kansas State Senator who can sponsor our bills. So next we ask of that single Kansas State Senator, who influences our target's decisions? Let's brainstorm some of those influencers. So first of all, we want to actually map out their relationships. You see here, we have a whole bunch of people who feed into the influence of that senator's life. Just like all of us are influenced by the relationships that we have around us, whether that's like people who are directly impacted by the issues that we care about, or just somebody who's very persuasive and what have you. Like we care about the people around us and they influence us. And so organized people is something that we have to look at whenever we're looking at who's influencing your target. So that's going to be things like looking at their congregations, professional associations, nonprofits that they're involved with, or that they even just have a relationship with, charities, alumni associations. But also people are influenced by money. So let's look at organized money. And again, this isn't just like random, right? Like you need to look at ways, it's not just like, oh, there's $5 on the ground here. You need to look at how they're putting this together. So look at their donors, lobbyists, special interest groups. Look at also people are influenced by other influencers, by the media, by clergy, by community leaders, by online influencers, by other politicians. You notice that there's other senators in there. And then of course, their own actual personal relationships, family, friends, adult children. Let me repeat, adult children. Please don't go to anybody's elementary school. That's not very great. Not good. We're not recommending that. But, you know, if they're a full grown adult and you happen to know their child, great. Look at their neighbors, their coworkers, their pastor. Now let's ask, how can we reach those influencers? Let's brainstorm that. Look at yourself. You have to map out your own relationships too. So looking at this map, you look at where you are. your pastor perhaps is a member of KIFA or Kansas Interfaith Action, that senator's church is also a member or can be influenced by KIFA. And there you go, you have like a line of influence between you and that senator, which if you went to them directly, you would not have that same kind of power. Look at like you and you have a friend who went to college with their, again, adult child, right? They're old college buddies. And so you talk to your friend who talks to their adult child, and then that adult child can talk to their senator parent. Look at those kinds of things. That's what power mapping is. It's physically mapping out our target, our relationships, and finding the kind of bridge between those things. So that way we can think about how we can use our, put our relationships into action to actually shift the power dynamics of how the senator is thinking about the issue that we care about. So some of these folks, the kind of pins, right? So if we look back, all those little circles, those people that we were actually mapping out, we're going to call those pins on our map. Similar, like if you go through a little treasure hunt, you have lots of different pins on that map, same thing. We have a couple of different people that we're going to look at through this process though. So first of all, we have our stakeholders. These are the people directly affected by an issue. Now, let me be very clear. Advocacy groups are not stakeholders. I work for a voting rights organization called Loudlight that predominantly focuses on young and marginalized communities. I am not somebody who has been disenfranchised, therefore I am not the stakeholder in this situation, even though that's an issue I work on. So take that into account, because if you're running a good campaign, then you're going to go by the nothing about them without them kind of model. You have to bring your stakeholders into this. Additionally, you need to look at the decision makers. Who can directly give us our wins? The key decision makers tip the balance of power and are essential to adding strength. You also have to look at the influencers. You're going to have both positive and negative influencers. They are going to be able to influence the decision maker directly to either grant or block our goal. So let's work through an example. Winning raises at work. Rose.
So this is an example that I love, and I'm going to ask people to drop some examples in the chat. So think about your work, or maybe someplace your friend works. Maybe they're a UPS driver, or maybe they are they stock shelves at Walmart. So if we're talking about their labor, these people who want a raise, who probably definitely deserve a raise, who are the stakeholders in their labor? So first, of course, you have the workers themselves, but who else has an immediate direct interest in the work that these folks do, or in the work that you do? Right, exactly. So you've got the people who use those services or purchase those products. So next you have the decision makers. So if you're a group of workers and you want a raise, who is the person that you go ask? Maybe you go ask your shift supervisor, but your shift supervisor doesn't actually have the power to say yes or no to your raise. So maybe you need to go a little bit higher and target the actual correct person. Then you go, once you figure out the correct person, you can go to your influencers. Maybe they're labor unions, maybe there are community organizations in your community that you can get to rally for you and tell your boss, we're not going to shop at your grocery store until you pay these people a fair wage. Or, we're not going to cross the picket line, and we're not going to let these people do this service until they've gotten the fair thing that they deserve. Now, there are people that sometimes we think about putting on those lists that we shouldn't, and I've called that OPE because I've come to deeply love the Midwest. So maybe your Aunt Susie really loves you and really wants you to get that raise, but Aunt Susie is in and of themselves not an influencer or a decision maker. So you don't necessarily want to put Aunt Susie on the map, but you might say to your Aunt Susie, hey, listen, how many friends do you have at church? And maybe she's got a ladies group of 10 that she sees every single week. And instead of doing their prayer request this week, or maybe in addition to, they could also make some calls. So that's how you take somebody who isn't an influencer and you bump them up. So next, we're going to talk about mapping. So what you see on the screen is kind of a little treasure map. It's also kind of like a real actual, say Google map that you put up on the screen, and you want to go 3 or 4 places. And so you start off here, and then you put a pin here because you want to go to that store, and then a pin here, and then you have to stop by. I was going to say pay the electric bill, but that's not a thing you do in person anymore.
Get some gas.
I'm old. Yeah, you're going to get some gas, and then you're going to go home. So what a map does is it just shows us the best way to navigate from where we are to where we want to be. So power maps are a little bit more involved than a geographical map. So we're going to add some stuff to our little treasure map here. This is a power map. It has two axes. On the left, the vertical axes, you can see like the arrows going up and down. That's a 1 to 10 scale of power. People who can directly grant or block your goal are closer to a 10. So the guy who owns the company that you work for can directly grant or deny your raise. On the bottom is a 1 to 5 scale, goes along the bottom there. And that has to do with how much people support or oppose your goal. So to the far left are people who like really are super down with your goal and they really want you to get that raise. And on the far right are people who don't absolutely want you to get that thing. And those people are going to fall somewhere in the middle. So when we're talking about pinning, we're going to pin them somewhere on this scale. How powerful are they? How much do they support or oppose your goal? So on your far left should always be the stakeholders, the people who are directly affected by the thing we're working for should always be 100% in favor of the thing that you're doing. Also on the left should be like supporters who are actively engaged in the work and who are committing resources, just time, people, or money to achieving this goal. Somewhere, a little closer to the middle, you're going to have people who give like verbal or written endorsement, such as like writing a letter on your behalf or presenting to city council, but maybe they're not committing like significant resources towards the goal. And then right about to neutral, you're going to have people who are potential allies, groups who maybe share an ideological predisposition with your goal, or people who have worked with you in the past. So, and then you get directly to neutral, and those are people like you're just not sure where they fall on your issue. So earlier we targeted a bill sponsor. We wanted to find a state senator to sponsor our bill. But when we look at the pins on the map, there's 3 of them there, right? Between where we are and where we want to be, because we also need a committee chair to pass our bill. And we need the legislative leadership, committee chair to pass it out of the committee. And we need someone in leadership to bring our bill to a floor vote. So that's when we go to actual mapping. Melissa?
Yeah. So whenever we're talking about like actually figuring out where people stand, so we have our physical map, but we also need to know like, how people are weighted on this issue. You need to get kind of the best cost benefit analysis you can of the people who are most powerful in affecting your goal, and the most, hopefully, you can move people to be most in favor of your goal. So while we're mapping this stuff out, you see that none of these are none of the folks that we have mapped here, whether that's our bill sponsor, the committee chair, or in our original thing of the Kansas senator that's going to be the Senate president, none of them are absolutely at 10s, because we do in fact live in a democracy regardless of how things feel sometimes, and nobody can just unilaterally do this thing by themselves. All of them are reliant on other people. And so while you have leadership who's incredibly powerful and like really approaching that 10, they're not at 10 themselves, because while they can immediately block a vote from happening, they can't pass something all by themselves. So this is going to be true for every campaign that you ever run. There's going to be very few, if any, 10s out there. And there's also going to be very few, if any, 0s out there. And I know that all of us, because we all care enough to be on this kind of a webinar right now, have at one point in time felt really powerless against an injustice that we've seen. But I guarantee that none of us are actually powerless. All of us have some power here. And so like looking at those things and understanding that nobody's going to be a 10 and nobody's going to be a 0, and we have to map out in between, is going to be how you can build the best strategy. So at the top, you have our 8, 9s, and 10s. Those are going to be active in the decision-making process. You see our bill sponsors an 8, right? They can call the bill to happen, but they can't do anything unless the committee chair calls it. So they're going to be a little bit higher on this. And then, of course, even if it passes out of committee, if it never gets a floor vote, it never gets a floor vote. So leadership's going to be impactful as well. So at an 8, that'd be somebody who's sitting in the room whenever the decision is shaped, and they're an active participant in that process. Most decision makers are at least at this level. By contrast, very, very few influencers are at this level. So most of the people who are on this webinar right now, we fall somewhere below the level of 8. Now, looking at our 3 targets here, we've got our original target, the bill sponsor, the committee chair, and then the leadership. Our goal of power mapping is to move our targets to where we want them to be, as far as the power to affect the goal and as far as the position on where they stand on our goal. Who do we need to move the furthest? Now go ahead and come off mute or put it in the chat. Come on, I know y'all better than that. I'm gonna call on somebody if nobody answers. Yes, peace mama, leader, that's right. Yeah, that's entirely right. The leader is the one who we need to move the furthest, because as you can see, they're the most powerful in this situation and they're the least in favor of our bill. So whenever we're looking at our power mapping, we might want to focus on the leader to think about how can we move that person the most? What kind of relationships can we put into action to be able to shift how things happen? So let's go ahead and look at that. Now we're going to have to move the committee chair a little bit too, because right now they're neutral. They don't really have any, any incentive. But chances are, if you're power mapping, you can, use two relationships or use one relationship for two influences. And so hopefully you can move both of them at the same time. Now let's go ahead and look at where we all are mapped out here in this process. So on the lower part of the scale, those folks are just like not on the radar. A group, it's not noticed at all. For example, like their spouse, maybe the leader doesn't listen to what their spouse has to think about policies. Frankly, I bet some of them are like that. Now a group, a 3 or 4, they can get attention, right? They can get media on a story. They can get responses from an elected official. Maybe they can get quoted in the paper. They'll get a meeting with an elected official, but a 5 to 7, they have an impact, right? So this is what we're all, like all of our groups and all of us as activists are really aiming to get in this place. We'll be consulted and asked about what we think about various issues. Or if an elected official is going to go against what we think on this, they have to calculate the damage about what would happen if they went against this group, because the group can affect some damage to what their agenda is. Those 5 to 7s, they may be asked at the upper level to review legislation that impacts members before it gets passed. And they'll be actively approached by decision makers to be included in the process of deciding how they make these decisions. Now, the pins and positions on our map changes depending on the target. So Kifa influences the bill sponsor, but maybe the committee chair doesn't listen to them and ignores the other organizations completely. Also, who else are they listening to? So the leader, the senator, the committee chair, other senators, this map is going to shift depending on who you're looking at, because they all have different relationships with these various pins. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into who are these people that we're calling pins? Who do we need to take into account? What do we need to think about these folks and all of that kind of thing? So first of all, our allies. I know that we have a lot of assumptions. Oops.
Sorry.
I know we have a lot of assumptions about what that actually means, but let's be really, really clear about our allies. We need to be incredibly specific. So the people, they're not an ally. It doesn't matter if we're right. Whenever we're talking about everybody, we mean nobody, because you can't mobilize everybody. That's just impossible. Opponents, who's our actual opposition? Who's likely to oppose our campaign, and why are they going to oppose our campaign? What's their motivation? And what are the ways that we can neutralize that opposition? But before we assume, let's not assume. Don't make an enemy whenever maybe there's somebody who could be neutral, or maybe they actually are going to be a surprising ally of yours. Don't assume that opposition until you've actually asked them, or their opposition has been publicly expressed. Because whenever we assume that, we make opposition out of neutral groups, or we give power to those who are already against us by setting things up as an us versus them framework before it's even ever been established. Over and over again, if we're acting like defeatist because we're like, well, that's so-and-so, they're going to come in and they're going to do this thing, then we're never going to win. It's already going to be set up as this kind of framework of us versus them already. And so let's look at the constituencies, the stakeholders that are actually impacted by this. Some of them, they're going to be allies, but most of them are going to be totally untapped. Again, talking about voting rights, because that's, basically what I do with my whole life. there is no way on earth that every single disenfranchised person is already automatically going to be an ally. I can't possibly know every disenfranchised person, let alone like make friends with them or like do good work with them. That's just not something that's going to happen. Most of them are untapped. So looking at stakeholders and constituencies, getting deep, authentic grassroots support from those who are impacted by this issue is one of the most important parts of organizing, the very most important thing that you can do. And so in doing that, think about your own personal power. You don't just like go to somebody randomly and be like, hey, dude, you know, you couldn't vote in the last election. Come on with me. Like, they're going to be like, you're some stranger on the side of the road just by yourself. Like, what are you doing, dude? Nah, you have to look at your own personal power maps and understand where you stand in relation to our targets, in relation to the issue, and in relation to these constituencies. So map out your own networks. Think about your own strengths and opportunities. Intentionally build out these connections. And then let's go ahead and walk through an example of what this could even look like, about how we can build out some of these relationships, how we can put those connections into action, and how those things will build influence over to the target.
So I see if you want to bring in Jamboard on that one. So in the direct messages, we have Danielle, who has volunteered to be our live example. Thank you very much, Danielle. Can you come off mute?
Sure.
So Danielle is a local community activist, and her issue has to do with school boards. Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about your issue?
Yeah, so for a little over a year now, there's been an effort with a local school district to move forward with renaming the district. So some local students, some local journalists in the school district did some really awesome reporting and was able to uncover that the school district was created by a Klansman, a Grand Cyclops, and created this school district as a way to jumpstart his efforts politically. You know, the whole purpose of indoctrinating, and through the years his name has stayed on the district. So the entire school district is called Seaman USD 345. The high school and middle school say Seaman, and up until just the last month, his pictures and even statues of him are lining the hallway. So students, with support of adults, because that's sometimes needed, and student-led efforts, we have been working really hard to push the school board to remove the name Seaman from the district. So it's been quite a challenge. Oh, you're on mute.
What's changed in the last month? Because you said like until last month his walls were, his picture was still on the walls at school. So
yeah. So in the last month, they chose not to actually vote. The school board chose not to formally vote on changing the name, which was a process that was kind of scheduled to start happening through various means. And they did kind of like a surprise thing at the last school board meeting that had rallied a lot of local supporters and support from schools outside of the city, and in turn decided to basically denounce the Klansmen, that they are disassociating from Seaman as a person, and will remove his likeliness from things, but continue to keep the name, but thought that this would be a way to kind of appease everyone.
So it sounds like you have a really great start there. First, I want to say that I love that this is student-led. Ideally, everything is always led by the impacted people. Ideally, it's not people outside of that group telling people what they should want or how to do it. I also love that it sounds like you've started to build some power and show some power. And if we really want to get to our final goal of getting the name removed, we can power map and figure out how to do that. So everyone in the audience, if you look through the participants, there's a blue slide, and that's where I'll be typing in the power pieces while Danielle and Melissa talk. So if you want to ask her the questions and then tell me where to pin it, and I'll type it in there.
Yeah, so great campaign, love it, that's wonderful. But just like we talked about earlier, you can't power map the entire school board. Well, I mean, you probably should, but not today. You have to at least pick one target at a time. So go ahead and pick like a middle of the road school board member who you'd like to persuade to become an ally on this campaign, a champion for you.
Okay, yeah. As a matter of fact, we kind of just recently, it popped on my radar because the school board member had Facebook requested me after the last school board meeting. So it kind of popped on my radar to be like, oh, wait, like this lady has not been extreme in either direction and had recently just started trying to find out more. So that, yeah. So do you want a name? Or are we just gonna go with
you? Yeah,
the
I mean,
lady?
you could just say school board member, right? As far as on this actual map between like the 0 to 10 for power to affect the goal and a 1 through 5 on the position, where do you think that you currently map them right now?
Position is definitely neutral. From what I'm seeing so far, and I think we could talk through some influences maybe, but yeah. So and then she's one of 7 school board members who then get to vote for the decision. So that puts her, pretty high up there on that. Probably at 8.
Now, who are some of the? I mean, you said that she's one of 7, so I assume that she's got some like there's other school board members, but who are some of the obvious influencers of this school board member number 1?
Definitely, there's some very close-knit ties with obviously those other school board members, and it does appear to be obvious that a previous school board member who happens to also be a representative, Republican, but not like, well, I'm not gonna validate, but that they're very, very close. So I know that relationship with the previous very long-standing school board member is very, very close, but that there are some close relationships with current school board members who are definitely more on our pro side. So it's kind of definitely some relationships within board members that are pretty influential.
Yeah, so she's got, let's see, so there's 6 other school board members. Approximately how many of them fall between, I mean, they're going to be probably between that like 8 and 9, right? Or about 9. But the other ones, how many of them would you say are very pro? Do you have any champions on the school board? And how many of them are like, over my dead body, dude, no way? And where do they fall otherwise?
Yeah, we definitely have currently like 2 that are pro, very, very strongly, and they do a decent job of being supportive kind of in a more low-key way, but we know that if as it came down to it, if a vote came, where that would go. I would say we have a few more that fall on the line of like between a 3 and 4. And then starting in January, 2 of the board members will fall off. One that was kind of more neutral, one that was a champion, with 2 very extremists. So very anti, that are actually pretty dangerous in general in their views. So additionally, like when talking about the board members, thinking about that influence, there is an anti group that has developed on Facebook, save the children type thing, which actually has its own power because that produced 2 of the board members that ended up running as a direct response to not wanting the name changed. So they rallied 2 people that were extremists to run for school board. And
There was a group, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
You said there was a group called Save the Children. Is that maybe they're running candidates, so they're a pretty well organized group. So they are completely opposed to the goal of changing the name. Is that correct?
Yes, and have jumping to loop in, CRT were, one of the people that actually won the school board position that was an extremist literally has "I'm against race equity" on his campaign page. So it goes to pretty far extremes as a way to push in that opposition vote.
Yeah, so that's, for sure. But so the Steeman students who are focusing on the name change, they're a pretty well organized group too, though. So I know that you've got some of the students who have been speaking out around this, some of the teachers. Who are some of the other allies that you have?
Yes, student, teachers, and many alumni.
And many alumni.
Yeah. They have organized a fairly, and alumni who don't even still live in the state are still helping organize and provide resources, sometimes financially, sometimes within their own power. So we've had someone who's been able to connect with some media coverage, and someone connect with mental health resources for the kids who are being bullied for being activists, different things like that. So alumni are offering some pretty strong support even out of state. And then I would say that they're, like for instance, showing up to school board meetings. We were able to rally several local organizations, like you had said, that like kind of do some of the work around social justice. We're able to show up in physical support.
For those?
So we had Black Lives Matter, we had Topeka DSA, we actually had a school district from Lawrence who came down and supported the kids, and then some Washburn University. We had contacted the Black Student Union. They offered their support and whatnot. It was kind of last minute, but they, I believe, had posted some things in support, I believe.
So real quick, I just kind of put them all in one little box there for now, but would you say that they are 1s or 2s in terms of how much they support your goal?
I would definitely put them probably at 1s.
And in terms of being able to influence what the school board does, where would you put them on the 1 to 10 scale? Are they at least as, I can't believe I just misspelled racist that many times in a row.
It's because you copy pasted, it's okay.
It is. Where would they fall on the 1 to 10 scale? Like at least as high as the alumni, maybe not as high as the students. What do you think?
Not as high as the alumni or students for sure, but at first we didn't think we had much power at all, because previous school board meetings that we showed up to and tried to speak at, they limited it to people who had addresses within that actual school district, and wouldn't let us speak, anyone sign up to speak. So we thought it was very limited. We thought we were definitely being silenced. But then at this last school board meeting, we found out they amped up some security measures, knowing that we would have more numbers there.
So having people there as a show of power actually increased your influence and power on the school board. Is that correct?
Yeah, they actually went off of schedule. They weren't supposed to address the the name change at all. It was not supposed to go to a vote. And in response to it being posted, like it was a well-known thing that there were going to be multiple people gathering in support, because it went kind of all over the anti-group's Facebook page, some, various messages that were received. I'm Satan, apparently. And so it was enough of a tactic where they then in turn went off of the agenda and chose to make that announcement. We felt like in a response to appease because of what had happened.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I want to throw this out there because sometimes negative responses from people who don't agree with your mission or feel concerned about any kind of level of confrontation about an issue, especially whenever it's in kind of bureaucratic positions, is actually like a response to you building power and disrupting the status quo. Many of you already know the story and it's very short, but it's a little ACLU flex, so I'll share it. Once upon a time, I worked at the ACLU and my coworker Kiana was working on district attorney races. And in response, got like a rant from the Sedgwick County District Attorney, a 10-page publicly posted letter against Kiana's organizing work. She was so upset about it. And I was like, Kiana, that means that you're building power. If you had none, he would have totally ignored you. And so this kind of response is a good thing, believe it or not, even if, our little Midwest hearts kind of feel funny about that, but like, actually, like, that's not something that you should apologize for. I know we only have a little bit more time left. I want to throw out, one last question around, like, related to this. As you see, Rose has moved some of these things over just based around like mapping out the people about who could be influential at all. But let's also just throw out, is there a unlikely influencer who's not directly related to this kind of thing, whether that be like, faith leaders or a specific media target or, something like that? Is a PTA meeting where, her kid goes to is on the cheer squad with, somebody else's mom, like somebody else's kid, right? Like, do you have some kind of an unlikely influencer who you think might really be able to tip the scales?
Yeah, so very, very, very active in her church. I think is like even a youth leader, which then really goes to our strength, considering that this is student led. So she takes the older students on trips and she's, the older student pastor, whatever the name might be. And, being student led and student driven, I think that could really be a place that we could get the other students, which that is a fairly small community with very much overlapping relationships, and that could potentially be, as well as again, very active in youth sports, which was an angle we were also thinking of getting the name off of uniforms. And so just in general, those two kind of angles that involve students, considering she has students those ages and participates, thinking that, this could potentially be an angle to move that towards.
Yeah, good call. That's,
Yes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when we look at this map, we can identify which people need to be our targets. So board member number 1 is our primary target, and then we probably need at least one more board member. And so maybe that could be 4 or 5. In this case, we know that number 6 and number 7, who were elected by the Save the Children group, are so opposed, we don't even need to bother with them. So we know that we can go and talk to the pastor, we can show up at their church, we could lean on the values of their church, we can use the people power of all the groups over there on the left to move these people over. So there are so many things we can do and so many possibilities that we can see once we have started like visually mapping out these things. So Eileen, I know that there are probably some questions from the chat
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thanks
Great
so much,
example.
yeah.
A-team, we actually do not have any questions in the chat yet. So now is your opportunity. Please let us know. What are your thoughts, questions? What would you put on here that may not be here? Any idea if you're from the same area? We would love to hear from you.
So there was one thing earlier, like a comment in the chat, not a question, where we were kind of looking at this earlier map, and I kind of put the map together, and this was the first one, right? And so we're assuming, you know, we have someone who maybe has some good relationships with people at, you know, the League of Women Voters, and maybe they hear from people at Loud Light, and maybe they actually don't like the Koch brothers, maybe they didn't get their yearly donation, or maybe they did. And then in our second map, we kind of moved them up a little bit. So I just want to say that this is not in any way like an actual map of an actual senator and where we think that they are in relationship to these different organizations. It's just, you know, groups I threw in on the example.
All hypothetical.
Very hypothetical. I wish that every single senator thought that what, you know, Kifa and Loud Lights people had to say was more important than what the Koch brothers had to say. Like, that's the world I want to live in. So it's probably why I mapped it that way.
So we do have a question. Someone asked me, does this district have a foundation? And I'm wondering, Leslie, if you could jump on the mic and kind of explain what you're thinking there.
Yeah, so I used to sit on a foundation of a school board here in the Kansas City area. And the power of a school foundation, school district foundation is pretty significant, especially if there were major donors who might have an interest in this and who might voice an opinion that might impact their giving to the foundation. So that's what my thought process was.
So that's a really great example of finding unlikely places to like reach in and find where the influence is. Like, who influences these people? Definitely donors.
Yeah, that's also a really great example of organized money, right? So even looking at things like, I don't know if Topeka schools actually have foundations, but they have booster clubs, right? And so if the booster club, which oftentimes is engaged with sports teams that have like a clan leader's name all over their logo, that is both a combination of like organized people, because these are typically parents or alumni or parents of alumni, and they're people who are organizing the money for these directly impacted programs. So yeah, that's a really good example of somebody who you would want to look at and see where they stand, see how they'd like to be engaged.
So I see Judy had a question, and what they wanted to know is, what role is the school administration playing in this issue? So that's also really great. Generally, school admin doesn't have the direct power to do like a name change. That's a little above their power grade, like a little above their level, right? Their pay grade. But maybe one of your targets has stopped taking your calls and they have turned off their cell phone and they are no longer hearing from you. Your school can't turn off its phone. So maybe if you're calling and saying, I'd like to talk to the principal, I'd like to talk to the superintendent. If they're getting 15 calls a day from parents who want that name changed, they're going to be so frustrated, they're going to turn right back and frustrate the board. These people are calling me, they won't stop. I can't get work done. You need to change the name so we can get back to the business of being a school. So again, school administrators are going to be an influencer that we can put on there, and we can influence them to move our targets.
Yeah, and also thinking about looking at school administration, or even like, you know, and this is true for various levels, whether you're fighting for like criminal justice reform work and you're going to look at local district attorneys and sheriff's offices and what have you, or voting rights, you have to look at local election officials, not elected officials, like county clerks or election administrators. While they don't approve their own budgets, they are impacted by budgetary constraints. So you have to look at the cost benefit analysis of somebody like the school administration who has to work within a budget. And it's like one of their main concerns that they have is the cost of replacing all of the names of stuff, right? The cost of replacing the uniforms and what have you. How do you fix that problem? How do you, or if you can't fix the problem, how do you make the cost benefit analysis to where it costs more for them to ignore it than for them to fix it, right? Whether that's because of work disruptions, because of reputation, because of staff and student dissatisfaction. Like there's a wide variety of things, but you have to look at that kind of cost benefit analysis and think about how you shift the power to where it is more convenient for them to do what you want them to do than it is to like just do nothing, which is oftentimes what like more bureaucratic institutions lean on, just not doing things about things.
We can be a squeak in the wheel, but we want all the wheels to be squeaky all the time.
So I want to give a shout out to Leslie, who is direct messaging me links to all of the foundations, names of people who are on these boards. She's saying we should Quora their donation list, which I mean, let's talk about it. So
Leslie, can we totally talk to you after that, like I'll catch up sometime this week or next. Like we would love to tag you in.
Yeah, Leslie, reach out to the organizers about this, because it sounds like there may need to be some connecting between Danielle and these two, as well as yourself. You've got some amazing ideas.
Eileen, do we have any more questions before we go to the homework portion of our evening?
I have not seen anything else come in. Let's give it a couple more seconds in case someone's being a little bit shy. I know we're running close to 8 o'clock.
We can stay on for a couple more minutes also, if we want to go over homework in case somebody has like a hard stop at 8.
So we can go over homework now. Yeah, and then answer that. Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get that started then, and I'll get those links in the chat for you.
So you may not have realized it, but we have some homework here for you. And I call it homework jokingly, but the fact is that we can sit here and talk about things all day long, and that's great. But if you don't use the information you gain in an evening, then you lose it. And also talking is great, but we want to actually get out there and be like Danielle and her group and like actually start getting stuff done. We want to be like Leslie and start getting those foundations on the map and creating change in Kansas. So our first bit of homework.
Yeah, I mean, as you all may or may not have been hearing, school boards have been a real hot topic this last year. And I know that a number of us, the ACLU, Loudlight, and a wide variety of other coalition partners have all been joining together to really look at power mapping school boards to make sure that education equity is not at risk. There's been a lot of discussion through school board races and in the legislature about banning parts of our history rather than being proud of our resiliency and our diversity and what have you. This is like a huge risk for all of us, whether we're students or just people in our community. And so if you want to power map your school board with us, if you want to power map how you can help protect education equity and make sure that our teachers are empowered to teach the facts without any kind of burdens coming from any given like state elected officials who don't typically write curriculum, come get on board. Let's power map your school boards together. Let's power map how we can help protect education. Eileen's put my email in the chat. I'm happy to bring you on so we can, join the campaign and come work in this coalition with us.
We will happily power map with you.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to give a shout out to librarians who have seen like a really sharp increase in challenges to books in the library. And this is anything that has to do with race, with sexuality. If there's a queer kid in the book, they want it disappeared out of the library. And sometimes these challenges are not even coming from people in the district or even in the state. They're coming from like these out-of-state groups. So people locally on the grounds opposing that is so necessary. So our next bit of homework is volunteering with our legislative action team. So we know that in addition to the school boards being really super racist, Kansas State Legislature tried last session, and they're going to try it again this year, to really engage in some classroom censorship. So another way to help stop that is to stop it in the legislature. Eileen is going to drop a link in the chat, or she may have already. If you go to that link, you can sign up to join our legislative action team. And I personally will give you a call and say, hey, here's our issues, here's the actions, let's do some cool stuff together. So then the next one after that is telling your story with the ACLU of Kansas. Storytelling is one of the most powerful things we can do to change the mind of a legislator and to reach other people. Even if we know that there's a bill coming up that we believe like maybe it's going to pass and maybe it's not going to be vetoed, but then actually there's going to be a lawsuit that'll stop it. And so we think, oh, okay, like we don't actually need to do anything about that. But when it comes to these topics, especially that affect like marginalized people and kids, like they need to see us fighting for them, even if we believe that the outcome will ultimately be okay. Also, knowing that there are other people in the community that care about them, that care about these issues, that maybe were just like them once, is incredibly powerful. So Eileen's going to drop a link in the chat. If you want to come talk to state legislators, either by formally giving testimony, or if you want us to help you like prep some speaking notes so you can go talk to your local school board and like maybe the public comment section of their meeting, like we will happily help you get your story together to tell it like in a really effective format. So that is all the homework we have today. Did we have any other questions? And it could be about the presentation or the homework we just put out.
I have seen no follow-up questions, but I do want to flag that if you missed our last citizen activist training, we had Mark McCormick, our amazing director of strategic communications at the ACLU, and our communications manager, Jesse, who is also amazing. And they talked a lot about how to develop effective communications. So if that's something you're interested in, keep an eye on your email or check out the ACLU website. We'll have that recording up there pretty soon.
Special thanks to everybody for coming, but especially Danielle. Thanks for power mapping with us, Danielle, and also fighting the good fight for getting, expelling racism from our schools.
Thank you. You guys do amazing work, and I appreciate you walking me through it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. We hope to hear from you soon.
Erin, there will be a recording of this as well.
We will be sending out the recording as well as all of these links, and you will also be getting a survey from us so that we know how we can do this better in the future. These are our first pass at the citizen engagement series, and we want to make sure that we are giving you the resources you need to take action. So absolutely keep an eye on your email. Maybe check out your junk box if you're not used to getting emails from ACLU of Kansas, because sometimes they do go there. And thank you so much for being here. Y'all are amazing.
Thank you all so much. Have a good night.